action on the 4 items. On items 1 through 3, Councilmember Spriggs recused himself due to a potential conflict of interest. The balance of the council provided direction, no reportable action taken on items 1 through 3. And on item 4, I believe you have the report.
Thank you. On item 4, the City Council has directed staff to work with the employees to see if the city can address some unexpected increases in our employee health care costs. Moving on to the regular meeting. Call the regular meeting and special meeting to order. Madam Clerk, could you please take the roll?
Councilmember Bragg.
Here.
Councilmember Spriggs.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Patton.
Here.
Mayor Janney.
Here. Could you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Again. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to agenda changes. Do I have any requests for some agenda changes this evening? Okay.
I'm pushing the wrong button already. It's going to be a long night. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull the warrant register, item 2.1. I had a few questions on some of the items I'd like to ask city staff. That's all right.
I see no problem in that. So what we're going to do, because our first regular report item is once again an Eagle Scout project, and the young man has not been able to make it here yet. So what I'd like to do with the current council is we'll just go through the consent items, 2.1 and 2.2, since there's only 2 items. So Mr. Hall, item 2.1.
Mayor and Council, Councilman Spriggs called me earlier this afternoon, said he may have some questions on the warrant register. Went through a few of those, but I will let him ask those questions, and if I can't answer them, I do believe that we have Hurley here tonight, who is a stand-in for Doug, but does always work anyway. So she can answer any questions that I can.
Thank you very much. As I've said from time to time, I like to periodically ask that we look at the warrant registers, certain of the larger items, just to make sure we are on our toes regarding these expenditures. And also, you know, for the public to understand that we are holding our city accountable for its expenditures. So we have the summary statement, attachment 1, and we have the printout, attachment 2. And I had one question on the summary statement, and then several questions on the actual printout, attachment 2. And then on the summary statement, there is an item about halfway down, U.S. Bank corporate payment system, and there's $17,335 that's designated miscellaneous operating supplies. And if you could just give some examples of what those might be, because when I looked on the detailed sheet, attachment 2, I'm sure they are all there, probably mixed in with other items, but I didn't see a total of $17,335 there. Just wanted to get a sense of what that item was. That's the first question.
Good evening. Good evening, Councilor Spriggs. Those charges for $17,000 are pretty much, they would be like digital camcorders, wireless color printer, miscellaneous small items that are for operational purposes, and there are purchases less than $250. The reason why they're on that U.S. Bank vendor, we don't issue any more purchase orders for expenses less than $250. So those are morally like miscellaneous expenses. Like they're less than 250 items.
Okay, so that's a great number of items that would sum to 17,000.
Yeah, like sometimes they will buy office supplies that are not being purchased in, you know, like Office Depot, because we have special vendors for other items that they would buy. like emergency small purchases less than 250.
Okay. The next couple of questions have to do with the actual printout, and beginning on page 5, there is right near the top, dated August 1st, Argus for $18,464,000, and as I understand it, that's the Automated Regional Justice Information System. It's described on the summary in attachment 1, but could you explain a little bit what's entailed in that item?
Yeah, I can do that. We are a member of a JPA with many of the organizations, and what that does is it allows, that's our share of allowing the San Diego Sheriff's Department to have access to those justice files, the confidential justice files.
I see. Thank you very much. Going down on the same page, there's an item called Athinx Inc., and listed are video surveillance and wireless link items, microphone cables, etc. I have and camera install. I have a sense that this applies to the new coastal camera surveillance system. Just wanted to confirm if that's true, that we had acted on some months ago, and or what else this might be if it's not that.
In addition to that coastal camera that the port provided as funding, these are the cameras that are installed at the Pier Plaza, and there's some videos that was included in it, and then also there are microphones and custom 10-foot cables. So the total of the 15,000 is 4,900 for video surveillance, wireless link for 1,800, and microphone cables for 2,200, and camera installation equipment for 6,700, which is like almost half of the cost. So these are funded by the port. This is not a city funded project.
The item, and maybe, I don't know if Tom Clark, oh yes, he's here. The item that we voted on some time ago for similar types of equipment was we were going to front that funding, and then it was going to be reimbursed by a grant.
Yeah,
and
that was,
I'm just wondering whether this is the same
this
equipment,
is
or this is all purely city expenditure, and if so, what is the purpose? Not just the items.
the first item that you were talking about is the $125,000 that was funded by the grant. It's the coastal camera for fiscal year. That was for fiscal year 2011. This is not part of that.
Okay.
This is in addition to the surveillance camera, but it's not part of the grant. They already installed the other one. It costs $125,000.
Chief, why don't you give him an explanation a little bit?
Yes, I'm just glad to. Councilmember, Pier Plaza many years ago had a camera system that was installed. It was an analog system. It went into a VHS tape deck. Cowabunga had the storage of that information, and it was put on there to monitor the surf hinge out in front for vandalism and also other activities that were around the port properties. That technology was obsolete. It had broken down and it was not in good repair. What this did was to use the same vendor that we had, and we were able to add on the same type of cameras that we could put on the very front end of Pier Plaza Cowabunga and the backside to monitor, because we were getting homeless people jumping the fence and storing their stuff behind Pier Plaza. And then that information is relayed over to a server. That's the same server that we bought with the coastal camera system, and then is displayed in the lifeguard center. Those cameras can be looked at by the Sheriff's Department, Homeland Security people, and to see what's going on in and out of the port properties.
I see. And these aren't port expenses, there are expenses?
They were part of the port budget for the lifeguards is where it was paid for. The city did not have any money coming out of its general fund for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Chief, you might want to stay there. I think the remaining questions are public safety equipment.
Right, okay, so then we go to, I guess, page 7. And it's the item also dated 8/1/2014, Warner Bodies, storage and drying lockers, $51,053. Could you explain that one, please?
Yes, sir. Firefighters have to store their turnouts and other response gear that they have, and we currently have wooden lockers that have been there probably since the station was built. They may have been replaced once prior to that. These lockers are set up with air ventilation systems in them and then dryer systems in there so that when the turnouts are wet from use, they get them washed and dried, and then they put them back in there to continue to off-gas and then be ready for them to work the next day. So that's what these are, a replacement of our existing lockers.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chief. And if you would, please, a couple more questions. On the top of page 9, there's an item called June 2013 COPS, COPPS GRT at $50,000. Do you know
Sure.
what that item is?
Annually, we get $100,000 that is from the county through a grant to provide monies for deputies to provide additional resources to the city. We have that money that comes in. There's one bill in May, and then this one in June that are invoiced to us at $50,000 a piece so that we can pay for that grant to the Sheriff's Department.
Thank you. And the last item is Treasurer, County of San Diego, HIRT membership at $18,518.
That is the JPA Regional Hazmat Incident Response Team. So they respond out of the city of San Diego. It's staffed on a truck company. If we have a major hazmat spill in the city of Imperial Beach, they come into the city and mitigate that spill for us because we do not have that capability. That is an annual fee that we pay into, along with all the other incorporated cities in the county.
Okay. Very good. Thank you both very much. I appreciate your responses.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on this item? Entertain a motion to ratify the warrant register.
So moved.
A motion and a second. Please vote. I don't think that. Do we take an oral vote on this? All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Motion carried unanimously by those present.
Moving on to item 2.2, I'd make a motion to adopt resolution 2014-7509 on the consent calendar. A motion and a second.
Can we have an oral vote, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, all in favor? Aye. Any nays? Abstentions? Thank you.
Motion carried unanimously by those present.
Moving on to item 5.1, Mr. Levine. You brought forward another great young man that's going to help us out again, right?
Mayor, Council, this is Armando Ochoa. You might notice the difference between 2 weeks ago and today. The last one was like 6'7", and today the opposite end of the spectrum. And so he's in my field. So he has a project that he's like to present to you all that would meet his Eagle rank requirement, and I'd like to let him present this to you.
Good evening. I will be presenting to you my Eagle project. My project will be a landscape beautification in front of the Public Works office here in Imperial Beach. This is a couple photos of the empty lot in front of the office that I will be working on. The benefits to this would be that we would make use of this lot using indigenous plants, carrying on the work that was done next to the building with the bike trail that uses indigenous plants to try to repopulate them. What's shown here is where I'm going to be planting the indigenous plants. The red stands for the California buckwheat, the yellow is the hummingbird flower, and the blue is the wishbone. The costs are minimal, and I got all these from different flower resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the young man? Not seeing any?
Naturally.
Please.
Thank you for the presentation and volunteering to do this work. The plants and flowers that you're talking about, you mentioned are indigenous. Does that mean they can operate with fairly minimal amounts of water and maintenance?
Yes. Well, let me get a second. In here, there's already a place for water irrigation that I will be putting in. I don't know if I can point to it, but it's near this. There's a pointer, right? Yeah. It's near the gate, and I'll be putting in a battery-operated irrigation system, which will become low maintenance because it is indigenous plants.
Councilmember, if I might, these are plants that were used in the new landscape area to the west of Public Works Yard, beside the Bayshore Bikeway, from the Bayshore Bikeway access, where we have the parking lot and so on, those plants in there. This is picking 3 of those species to put in here. They're all low water use, very drought tolerant plants.
Mr. Patton, please.
I'm familiar with the California buckwheat. Where do you find these plants? The hummingbird flower, the wishbone bush. Is that something you go to Home Depot or?
I just researched them online and looked for indigenous Southern California plants, specifically Imperial Beach, and these are the ones that I found.
What store are you gonna find them from?
I have the website at home on my laptop.
All right. I'm curious because I need to do something like that at my house, so I was writing down these, so thank you.
There is a native plant nursery down off of, what's the street starts with, I think it's H, Hollister, south of Coronado Avenue on the east side. We bought some materials there for purposes like this. There's also what used to be El Salvador sells a lot of those kind of plants.
So, Mr. Levine, you're just asking us to authorize you and the city manager to sign an agreement to move this project forward?
We would like your permission to proceed with this.
Do you have the concurrence of the council? We have that. Thank you very much, and thank you, sir, for coming forward.
Thank you.
I made a little mistake earlier, Mayor, and I've skipped a couple items normally on the agenda, so I'm going to start with Mayor, Council, reimbursements, disclosures, community announcements. I just went right on through that. Ms. Bragg.
Thank you. I attended the Chamber of Commerce installation dinner and was the MC for their auction items, and it was wonderful. It's always wonderful to see members of the business community accept a position on the board of the Chamber of Commerce and the Business Improvement District. So well, I'm not our representative, I was just there along with Councilmember Spriggs, but it was a wonderful event hosted at C-180, and I was glad to be there.
Mr. Spriggs.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually speechless after that reference to the wonderful Chamber of Commerce dinner that welcomed the new board members. I thought it was a very, very nice dinner as well, very well attended, and a couple other interesting MCs were involved there as well.
And nothing else.
And neither do I. Moving on to comments from city staff.
Mayor and Council, I have been challenged by Blair King from the City of Coronado for the ALS Ice Water Bucket Challenge. And
Careful, dude.
now, unlike the City of Coronado who wastes drinking water, I'm going to do it, but we're going to do it down, and we're going to use salt water because it's a drought and all, so we don't want to use any drinking water. And I told the mayor I would like to challenge the council to do that. He reminded me I've not had my evaluation yet. And so I've got to come up with 3 other people, so there'll probably be some staff members avoiding me for the next few days. But I did want to make sure that we mentioned that that's going on, and I think it's become a little bit of a phenomenon, and everyone sees it on the news. Certainly a great cause, and I'm honored to participate in that and look forward to talking some of you into participating in that as well. So.
Very good. We have a motion in a second, Mr. Bilbeck. Make fun of your 3.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Levine had a grant that he received this week and wanted to tell the council a little bit about that. Although it's not, I think it's still
not quite
pending.
Well, we'll wait on it. We've got not something that's official.
Okay, let's do that. Thank you.
Moving on to public comment, Jim Mickelson.
I'm here for the purpose of introduction. My name is Jim Mickelson, a resident of Imperial Beach at 169 Elkwood Avenue, also a member of the Board of Directors of the Imperial Beach Chamber of Commerce. I come to introduce myself as the chairman of what we now call ourselves committee, which is the Imperial Beach the Chamber of Commerce Liaison Committee to the City Council. Our purpose is to attend your meetings, to take back to our membership and our board legislative action you may be working on for purposes of soliciting comment from our members, and when appropriate, maybe bringing a position back to the council to provide feedback to you as you do your duties for this community. My co-chairman is Jack Van Zandt, who's not here right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just so that you know, Mr. Hall might be able to help you, as I know that you plan on attending these, but I noticed that Blue Staff has let me know our next design review board meeting, we're dealing with, I believe, Ninth and Palm stuff, so you might be interested in that one too.
Any notices the city staff can provide me? I believe Ed has my email address now. We'll send a quote and hope to attend them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. June Engel? I think here's another one of your challenge, right?
So hi, good evening. I'm June. My name is June Engel. I'm the branch manager of the Imperial Beach Library, 810 Imperial Beach Boulevard. Well, I have some great news. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to Cassie Estrada. She is our new full-time supervisor, the one that we've been waiting for a while. She's coming to us from National City. She has a strong background in bilingual and community outreach. One of my favorite things about her, she's computer literate. And she does a really great story time. She's great with kids. She's already taking off running, and we're all excited about it. She started 2 weeks ago, and so I wanted to give you the opportunity to get to know her or say hi. I guess, yeah. Give you a few little updates on the library, not the project, I'm sorry. You guys, because I keep joking and you say you probably know more than I do. But anyway, we are starting our homework club. We started up again today. We had taken a hiatus during the summer, so we have started up. We have volunteers from Mar Vista High School. Seniors that are coming down to coach and help kids with their homework ages kindergarten through 6th grade. We're starting up a citizenship class again in September. It kind of petered out a little bit, and our volunteer tutor left for a job. And so we just have 2 new volunteers who are going through the background checks right now. And when they get started, which we hope will be beginning of September, we'll be having our citizenship classes back up. October is going to be a busy month for us, October and November. October, we're going to have our spooky family night Halloween movie. I don't know what the movie is yet, but we kind of turned in our Halloween celebrations into 2 different things. So we're going to have a spooky night like we did last time, show us a spooky movie, and there'll be raffles and everything, come in costumes. On Halloween night, we're going to try and offer that day free makeup. So if kids need to have their makeup done, they can come to the library and we'll do their makeup for them. which leads us into November 1st, which is Dia de los Muertos. I hope I said that right. Everyone laughs at my accent across the way. But that's going to be our signature program from now on. It's going to be the Dia de los Muertos program. We have a mariachi band. We have ballet folkloria. We're going to have food, sugar skulls. It's going to be a big event, and we're running that with in partnership with you, I guess, because we don't quite have the Marina Vista room, but we're using the Marina Vista room. Does that make sense? But we're very excited about the programs that are coming up. I will have more information for you on the library project hopefully sometime soon. Also, a reminder that next year is 2015, and it is the Imperial Beach Library's centennial. That library is 100 years old. Not the actual building, but the institution. We started out in the back of a post office. So you'll be hearing more about events that are happening along with instruction for the centennial celebration. And if you have any questions across the street, hey, putting on another hat. Gosh, Mr. Spriggs, I'm so sorry. I didn't get a chance to give that to you before I left at the Kiwanis meeting. So this is a flyer for the Kiwanis. We're having our September Fest coming up. If you're interested in buying tickets, it's $10 a person for one brat and one beer. It's a really fun event. I don't know if anyone, you have to be 21 to come now. Sorry. I encourage you all to come. If you need tickets, you can come see me, or you can call the number and find out from them. But it's a fun event. Those that have been to it, I think, had a really great time.
Is this the one you blatantly pressured me into?
No, I just asked if you had bought the ticket. That's all.
And I said yes, and I'll try to get my other council members to also.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. Did you have some more flyers? There's no problem. I appreciate that. Yeah. I just asking some questions. You guys have a great evening. We're still a little short-staffed, so we'll be going back.
And just because you brought up, you're not up to date on the construction project, but after we discussed it here at this council, the county board of supervisors moved forward with the next phase, which is to go out with the RF. Since it's a design build, they went out with that process.
To my knowledge, we've gone to bid, and I can tell because when I come into work, there's people that I don't recognize in suits and ties taking pictures all over the place, so I'm pretty sure we've gone to bid.
Yeah.
But
the suit and tie guy doesn't make sure he's the best, though. Could be somebody dressed like Mr. Pat.
Yeah, we're going to take pictures of the building. Right, you all have a nice evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Ms. English, she had mentioned Juana's. They're having a fishing derby this Saturday from 8 to 12 at the pier. They're looking for volunteers. If you can't volunteer, go down there and bring a kid. Go down there. So I'm going to be down there. And it'll be fun. You fishing? I'm going to volunteer. I'll cut bait.
That concludes our public comments. Moving on to our next item, which is item 5.2. Mr. Hall.
Mayor and Council, this is a request to approve a resolution that will appropriate not to exceed $100,000 for the design of the sidewalk along Delaware. As you know, the west side of Delaware is a little bit complex and some pretty severe slopes, but we do want to make sure that we have pedestrian access to the new Ninth and Palm Commercial Center, so we are asking for an appropriation of that money. I should update you that I was told today by Mr. Levine that the current engineer's estimate to complete that design is less than $30,000. It's around $28,000. So certainly we will not expand all of that, but that gives us the leeway to make sure to get that sidewalk designed before that commercial development is constructed. We'll look at all options, by the way. I think that there's been some concern about pushing that road further west, given the severity of the slope. So we'll look at everything from sidewalk on one side of the road to maybe narrowing the road, whatever's necessary to provide adequate public access in that area. So again, we're just seeking approval of Resolution 2014-75-12.
2004. Do we have any questions for Mr. Hall on that? I think this is something that we asked him to move forward on. So I make a motion to adopt Resolution 2014-75-12. A motion and a second. Could we please vote? Can we take an oral vote? All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? Thank you.
Motion carried unanimously by those present.
Moving on and putting on our hats as the Imperial Beach Redevelopment Agency successor agency. Mr. Wade, 96.1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the successor agency. It's that time of year again. the 6-month period where you review and approve the administrative budget, and in the next item, the recognized obligation payment schedule. Every 6 months, going into the next 6-month period, which is the period from January 1, 2015 to June 30th, 2015, you're required under the Dissolution Act, the act that dissolved redevelopment agencies, to approve a 6-month administrative budget for the successor agency. By statute, given the amount of enforceable obligations we have, that is capped at a maximum of $250,000 per year. So our administrative budget for this 6-month period is $125,000. The budget basically has stayed the same for the last several 6-month periods, and we are expending about this amount of money. It reflects the actual expenses that we've incurred. At some point, we expect that this would start to go down, but as yet, we still have bond monies to expend, we still have projects continuing on, and we still have the obligations of the successor agency, such as preparing ROPS, submitting it to you for approval, submitting them to the budget, and keeping the successor agency going until our bonds are paid off. So we're asking for adoption of Resolution SA-14-44, approving the 6-month budget.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Mr. Wade on this item? Please.
Just one clarification, Mr. Wade. Thanks for the tight summary. In your staff report, you mentioned in some places a minimum amount of 250, and others places it's a cap of 250. Is there something I'm missing there, or should it always be maximum or cap?
Well, I guess it's actually both, and it depends on the amount of enforceable obligations. It's for us, we can get no more than 250. It's 200. The lesser, actually, the greater of 250,000 or 3% of your total enforceable obligations. So for some, it's a minimum, and for us, it's a cap because we don't have enough enforceable obligations. So we look at it. I'll go back and look at the staff report. I might need to clear that up, but for us, that's the maximum we could ever get.
Yeah, could just be typos, Mr. Wade. I'll give you my copy, which has the markups. Okay. Save you some time.
Then we have before us the resolution SA-1444. I'll second that motion. Any further discussion? We're doing an oral vote here?
Yes, please.
Okay. All in favor? All right. Any nays? Abstentions? Thank you.
Motion carried unanimously by those present.
Item 6.2, Mr. Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this, as I mentioned in the last item, is the actual recognized obligation payment schedule for the period of January 1st through June 30th of 2015. It's the ROPS 1415B, that's the fiscal year 1415, and the second 6-month period B of that period. We're recommending approval of this recognized obligation payment schedule. The only new item on it this time round is the agreement for expenditure of excess bond proceeds that was approved by the successor agency on August 6th. That has been placed on the ROTS as an enforceable obligation. After your action item on August 6th, we forwarded that resolution or that item to the Oversight Board. It was subsequently approved by the Oversight Board, and as such, it's now on the ROPS. The resolution approving it, the Oversight Board resolution, was sent to the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance, under statute, requested a review of that resolution, which is not unexpected. And so they will begin the process of looking at the agreement, and so when they get the ROPS, after it's approved by the Oversight Board, and this will go to the Oversight Board, the budget and the ROPS on September 10th, they will have advanced warning, if you will, that this item is going to appear on the ROPS. So that's the only new item.
What exactly was that item again?
That's item 39. It's the agreement for the expenditure of bond proceeds. There's the $1.274 million and some additional leftover monies of approximately $400,000. And then if we get a grant approval for the Bikeway Village project, it may reduce the allocation of bond monies, 2010 bond monies that we put towards that project. So that agreement would provide the bond funds to the city for their use, and the city would hold those funds until they're expended, and that could take beyond the 6-month period, keeping in mind that when you put projects on a ROPS, they're supposed to be expended in that period. So the agreement would set up a framework so that we'd have more time to expend the bond. The one other thing I wanted to mention is that in this ROPS, based upon the bond indenture, you may recall we went out for a 2013 bond refinance. The bond indenture requires us to put aside an annual amount of bond debt service at the beginning of each calendar year. So in this ROPS, we've asked not only for the bond payment for May of 2015, but also the bond payment for November of 2015. That would fall outside it in a different ROPS period. So that's greatly increased the amount that we're asking for in this 6-month period. Our understanding is, and our expectation is, the DOF is not going to approve the bond payments for the next ROPS period, even though our bond indentures say that that's a requirement. They're just going to say, well, you'll get what you get for the 6-month period, and we'll be forced to ask for it in the next ROPS. That doesn't impact us greatly. In fact, it's a benefit in an odd way to the general fund, because that will create a bigger residual amount of tax money, 26% of which will come to the city. So I just wanted to advise you, you may look at the amount we're requesting and say, well, that's bigger than the last time. Well, it's because we told our bond counsel and we told our underwriter that we would request the funds as required by the bond indenture, but there's nothing we can do to force the DOF to give us the money. So I just wanted to point that out because it is a little nuance in the ROPS that might look a little odd. But we're recommending approval of Resolution SA 14-45 approving the ROPS. 1450B.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Wade. A couple things I wanted to ask about regarding the report. For a little bit more elaboration from you, you mentioned these item 39 on the ROPS, which are called quote specific projects consistent with the purposes in the 2010 tax allocation bond proceeds. When we dealt with this item before, I think that the alley paving expenditure was what we'd asked about, whether that's consistent with the bond statements of eligible expenses and that sort of thing. And you went over that in detail, and we saw that there were a lot of Palm Avenue corridor-related expenditures, including alley improvement, which was called out specifically. I wasn't aware that we were talking about $3 million worth of activity at that time. Now that I see it in the ROPS, it kind of makes me wonder whether that amount is consistent with what we talked about before. It may be just my memory failing me once again.
And thank you for the question. The amounts are, and I'll try off the top of my head, but the amounts that were allocated to the alley are $1,274,452. That's for the alley. And that was the amount that was being held by the Wells Fargo, the trustee, Wells Fargo. They've been given to the city, and the agency is now holding them, and we hope to give them back to the city for expenditure. There's also $400,000 of unexpended 2010 bond proceeds that had been allocated to other projects that just have not been expended. And that $400,000 was then added into that amount. We had anticipated potentially, potential use on a future hotel or other uses, which were also provided for in the bond covenant as well as under redevelopment law. So those can be used for justified and a use that's identified in the bond covenants. The other amount was $1.4 million, and that was the amount that we had projected might be available if a grant was awarded for the Bikeway Village project. The Bikeway Village project has been allocated up to $1.8 million of bond proceeds under our owner participation agreement executed with that property owner. The implementation agreement for that agreement is being developed and drafted and will be to you in the next month or two. We have made application for upwards of, well, actually $1.8 million. It's the same grant money that was discussed today. The State Transportation Commission is acting on recommended projects. It was not recommended. What happens then is that it goes down to the local agency, SANDAG, for consideration. So there's still a chance that we might get some of that those bond proceeds. If we do, the idea would be we take somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.4 million of the 1.8 and replace it with grant money, so that would free up 1.4 million of additional 2010 bond money that we could use for projects as yet unidentified, but in compliance with the indenture and the covenants of the bonds, which is the requirement. So those funds we haven't allocated to any specific project, but projects, there's a lot of different projects that are eligible for the use of those funds, and our finding of completion from the Department of Finance allows us to expend those 2010 bond proceeds for their intended use under the bond covenants. So that, I believe, totals 3.6 or 7 million.
Okay, thank you very much. The other question that I had has to do with the city loan repayment and where they're restricting the amount that we can receive to a certain cap every year. Is there any, I hate to even say this or ask this, but is there any likelihood that the Department of Finance may add some limitations on those loan repayments, that we have to use them for ROPS items or administrative expenses or that sort of thing, or is that likely to remain free and clear of any such obligation since it was general fund money in the first place?
That's a good question. I stopped predicting what the DOF and the state legislature might or might not do. At this point, unless that we did hand out some legislative actions at the state level, I haven't seen any legislative momentum that would alter that. My bigger concern is that the state may, when they start paying back these loans, and recently there was a court case involving our neighbor to the north that the city prevailed on the repayment of the city loan in a much greater amount than we are getting paid back. If that continues to be the case, the concern may be that they would revisit how those are paid back. That's a greater concern. I don't anticipate that they're going to mandate what it must be used for. They've already mandated that 20% of that money has to be used for affordable housing, or go to our housing commission, or housing authority rather. At this point, I don't foresee it. We should be paid back within a 2-year period. I don't see any legislation that would affect it, but you never know.
Thank you, Mr. Wade.
We have before us Resolution SA 1445, approving the RUP. Motion for the second. We take an oral vote. All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions?
Motion carried unanimously by those present.
Thank you. And, you know, the interesting thing, though, I know that we don't want to jump ahead of the things, but the grants we've done very well on. There was one grant that, in a sense, Mr. Levine put in for it. It looks like we might be getting. Keep our fingers crossed. They can always change their mind on what Mr. Wade was, and there was actually a third one. We're talking probably over $2 million of grants that we might be able to get within the next 12-month period. So once again, our staff has been chasing that money that's out there that can help us along with a lot of capital projects. So we just don't want to say that we've got them if we don't have them yet.
On that point, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Wade, you mentioned in response to this agenda item question I had about the Bikeway Village project, a very important project for us. I gather from what you're saying that it's reasonably on track, because we have not heard a full report in some time on the status of the project.
It is, and they are, and this is topical, I hope, given that the, well, in a roundabout way, the bond funder expenditure agreement includes money that might come from that project. They've submitted for building permits. They're getting ready to resubmit for building permits. They're still out there aggressively looking for tenants. One of the things that's kind of hot right now is breweries and microbreweries, and their leasing agents. Actually, I went to an event, an APA event in my neighborhood last night for one that looked like it would be sort of ideal for that location, and so they're actively seeking out these things. And there was even a conference up in Vista at the beginning of the month on that type of use. They are still actively pursuing tenants, and we are very close to having the implementation agreement done. It's almost completely drafted. We'll have one more meeting with staff and our consultants and with the applicant, and hope to have something to you soon. It's still very much a project.
Thank you. That concludes our agenda for this evening. Meeting is adjourned.